So we all know that if we want our businesses to grow, we have to reinvest money into them. We have to take some of those lovely profits that we make and then decide what to spend them on such that the business will grow further and faster. The businesses who know how to reinvest will grow faster than ones who don't, and founders who insist on doing everything themselves. But the question is, should you reinvest that money? And in particular, who should you reinvest that money in? Who should you hire? What for? When is the right time to hire? And when do you risk actually overhiring and creating further problems for yourself down the road? Well, in this video, I'm going to cover some of these ideas to help you think about how you should strategically hire for growth in your business. My name is Olly Richards. I'm the founder of many online education businesses, including storylearning.com, which is a multi-million-dollar online education business. I'm also a mentor and advisor to other business owners in various different spaces. So when I'm thinking about who to bring onto the team, I'm always asking one very specific question, which I've known about for years, but I most recently heard from Ryan Deiss, which is, how does money happen inside my business? It's a fantastic question. How does money happen? What are the specific things that need to happen so that you end up with money in your bank account? There are often a lot of peripheral things that go on in your business, but the actual path to money is usually quite simple. And one of my guiding questions is, how do I resource the process that results in money happening? Let me give you some examples. So inside Story Learning, so we sell language learning products and have done for the last 12 plus years. And we realized at one point, after about 5 years or so, that the way that we could most reliably increase revenue in the business was to make more offers. It's the old adage of send more emails, make more money. It really does never fail. So we went from a system of doing quite random ad hoc product launches whenever Olly had an idea and we wanted to make something and sell it, through to a systematic approach of doing 2 launches a month. So we have a mid-month promo and an end-of-month promo, because we realized that if we made more offers, guess what? People would happily buy them. And so for a couple of years, we tried to do this, but often failed. And the reason was that we had a fairly small team. It was me plus a few other people who had grown alongside the business. And what would happen is we would create a promotional calendar. We'd have the intention of running 2 promos, but inevitably something would come up. There would be a new product launch that we all got swamped by, or we got involved in some new project, or something else happened. And out of 24 planned promotions over the course of the year, maybe half of those would happen. And there came a point where we got to the end of one year and I sat down and I thought to myself, look, we're trying all of these different things. We have all of these different ideas to make money. But there is one thing that we know makes us lots of money that we are not actually doing. So why are we wasting our time with anything else when this is one thing over here that we know makes us money that we're not managing to do? We'd gone for a couple of years trying, but basically failing to run these regular promotions that we had planned. And so when we thought about this question, how does money happen in the business? Our single best option, which was running twice monthly promos, was not happening. And so there was no point thinking about anything else until we fixed that problem. And so what we did was we went and we hired for the role of email marketing assistant. And their only role was to make sure that the monthly promos happened. So they would be in charge of putting together the email sequences, which often didn't involve any new writing. We already had the sequences made from when we launched the products in the first place. It was more a question of just finding the emails, queuing them up, making sure they're up to date, scheduling them in our email software, making sure the landing page was fine, and then just making sure it got sent out. So we had a specific role inside the business which was devoted to making sure these regular bi-monthly promotions would actually happen. And you won't be surprised to hear that we went from making this much money to making this much money. It really wasn't simple. We could have done it 2 years ago, but that's what, or lack of experience, does to you. The principle here is that for the perspective of the structure of the business, the human structure of the business, the people inside the business, that hiring people to fully resource the thing that makes money happen is really the biggest ROI that you can get from any kind of investment. Resource first the things that make money happen, because businesses have to work on the back of a system. If the business is reliant on you remembering and having the time to do the thing every month, that is not a system. But a person whose job it is to do those systems and actually make sure they happen, well, now that is a system that will happen month after month, which then frees you to step back and work on other things while the money still comes in, because we've resourced the thing that results in money. Now, this brings us to a warning of sorts. what can happen if you get this hiring piece wrong? There are a lot of people who kind of fantasize about having a team, and they believe that the larger the team, the more successful the business. Because, whenever you get asked, how big's your team? If your answer is a big number, there's somehow that kind of carries more clout than if it's a small number. People kind of associate team size with success. That is complete nonsense. But a lot of people do tend to sleepwalk into building a big team. And we saw this a lot in COVID, where there were businesses that suddenly exploded overnight. Here's COVID right here. Businesses exploded overnight because of, algorithms and people staying at home and stuff like that. And so businesses that were pretty small before suddenly were making tons of money. And so what did they do? Well, they had so much free cash flow available that they started to hire. And they hired because it was kind of easier to staff the business and run the business with more people. Notice that it was easier, not necessarily necessary. Okay, so the businesses would make a bunch of money during COVID and then bring in all these people to kind of make it easier. Were they necessary or not? Kind of debatable. But what happens is then after COVID, when the big spike in purchasing subsided, revenue drops, but your staffing remains the same, and this creates a very big black hole inside your business. And this is where you can end up having a business that does a couple of million in revenue but makes no profit because you have overhired. And the issue with hiring, if you bring people into your permanent team, there's a real cost associated with that, both financially, because redundancy is expensive, but also emotionally, because as a human being, you are likely quite slow to fire people from your team and thin down your team, because it's very difficult to do. These people have become friends, they've become people that you care about. And so it is just natural to be very slow to let people go from your team. And so this creates a kind of perfect storm where you've got very, very high costs and revenues that are susceptible to dips. And so when we think about the earlier question of, where is it? How does money happen? And we come back to this example over here. In our example here, money does not happen from having this team. Money happened through a crazy kind of combination of events around COVID, where suddenly the internet exploded, everyone was at home. That's what made the money happen. And so being very slow to hire for the things that you might want but don't actually result in money, and then being very quick to hire for the things that do result directly in money, is one of the most important mindsets to make sure that your business stays sustainable over the long run, because this has a very real impact on you as a business owner. Unless you're playing the startup game where the only goal is to get big and then have an exit, the amount of money that you're able to extract from the business as the business owner over time depends entirely on the gap between your revenue and your profit. If you bring up too much overhead, then you are really limiting your ability to actually extract money from the business over time. So this does have a very real impact on you and your life. And by the way, if you're enjoying this content, you might like my free case study. It's Anatomy of a $10 million online education business. It's completely free. It's very big. It's 118 pages, but it lays out exactly how my language learning business works. You might find it interesting. There's a link in the description if you'd like to get a copy of that. Let me give you another example of how money happens inside the business. So this is my business, the channel you're watching right now, ollyridges.co is my business brand. Money happens in a very simple way inside this business. So what I do is I buy ads, and then I send emails, and then I have inquiry, or I have people that work with me in different ways. Let's call it that. So whether that's kind of one-to-one mentorship that I offer, or mastermind events, or things like that, that's how money happens. It's really quite simple. And so I do this myself. I send emails myself. It's really important to keep that founder energy in the business. I also deliver on the product myself, because delivery costs are quite lean in this business. And so what I make sure that I do is I make sure that the only other thing that is responsible for making money happen is the advertising. And so I spend huge amounts of money on different forms of advertising in order to bring in new audience, because having audience is what's responsible for this. So while the email itself is the way that money happens, I resource that with my time, and I always will. But in order for that to be effective, I need audience. And so this is what's responsible for money happening. But there's something else as well, which is this YouTube channel. When I look at people who apply to work with me one-to-one or join my events or my groups, YouTube is very, very often cited. So I know that YouTube, even though I have, small, low numbers of views on these videos, it doesn't matter because I know that people are watching the videos, they're consuming the content, they're getting to know me, and they're sort of, they're sizing me up. Is this someone who I want to learn from? And so I treat this as fully resourcing how money happens. And so I have a video team, shout out to Ed and the team, who do a fantastic job of editing my videos, titles, thumbnails, all of these things. And because I know that I probably wouldn't do a very good job of doing that myself, and also I don't really have the time. And so I'm very happy to invest into that alongside the ads, because I know that this is what will create the conditions for money to happen in the business. And so, I spend 6 figures a year on these things combined. And I'm very happy to do it because I understand very clearly that that is how money happens. How does money happen in your business? What is the specific process by which you end up with money, and how can you hire? Now, importantly, the thing that I am not doing inside this business, if my revenue is here, what I'm not doing is asking myself, okay, who are all the people that I can hire in order to, just make my life a little bit easier or whatever. I'm not doing that. I have actually 0 employees inside the business. I have 0, but I have some expenses with software and stuff, but very, very little, because I understand that there is nobody that I could hire that will have a direct impact on how money happens in the most fundamental sense at this stage. All I need to do is to continue to invest into audience. Now, with the ads that I run and with the video team that I have, so ads are obviously a kind of one-off cost, and then the video team is an agency. I could, if I wanted to, stop these at any point. They're not fixed overhead. They're simply marketing costs. And so what that does is it allows me to very, very intentionally, and I've learned this lesson as a result of, having been through this in story learning and also observing other businesses and seeing how they, get hiring wrong. I'm very intentionally with this business keeping all of this space here as pure margin, which is what allows me to make this particular business, 90% plus profit margin, because I understand that the way that money happens in the business is simply through my delivery here and then spending on the audience creation. Okay, so it's an example of being very, very intentional about understanding the business model, understanding the dynamics, and not overhiring. There's a part of me that would love to go out and hire 5 people tomorrow to make my life easier, but I know it's not a good move for the business. I'm very deliberately not doing it, and as a result, it's creating a very, very profitable business operation that I want to keep that as it is for a very, very long time. But the point here really is one of intentionality. It's about understanding the dynamics of your business, how it works, understanding what you want and the life that you want to live, and then acting accordingly. And the most important thing with all of this is that you don't burn out. And if you want to know how I managed to reverse a lot of the burnout that I suffered over many years, you can watch this video over here, which explains exactly how I think about burnout, how I manage burnout, how I stop it happening, and I can continue managing many different businesses and staying relatively sane in the process.